That's everything. We are going to talk about another source of bias, which is question bias. But a lot of these terms are going to seem really similar to what we did in the last video on survey bias. And there is some overlap. Survey bias is usually where you tell the person you need to change the way you're doing the survey. Question bias is where you say you need to change the wording on your survey. So you can see how there's some overlap. That's why on exams we're very careful that if there's two possible answers, only one of them is an option to you on the exam. So, for example, complex bias is very similar to the uninformed bias we saw before. You word a question like this: do you believe the tax code regulation 1585 should exempt some? I mean, who in the world knows what tax regulation 1585 is? Your question is so complex that you've made it so that everyone is by nature uninformed. Unless you happen to be that one weird student who studies tax regulation code. I can't imagine why you would. Also, this is overly complex because look how long it is. You get about this far down where I stopped and people just stop listening. Whatever, they're ready for the yes or no, just so you leave them alone. Also notice there's two questions in one. Do you believe about the tax code, and do you wish you had a cell phone with a QR reader code? Well, if you lump two questions together so it looks like one, you're creating complexity. You're going to get bias in your results. People aren't going to be answering what you want them to answer. They're going to get stuck on either one or the other part of your question. A really tricky one is question order. Look at the order of these guys. Do you think there should be more money in education? Well, yeah, education's important. Do you think the government should do more to reduce the deficit? The way it's going to do that is pulling from education. I just said we should pour more into education, so yeah, maybe not. If we switch them, do you feel like the government should reduce the deficit? Yeah, we need to save money. Do you believe the government should increase funding for education? Well, no, we're saving money up here. So question order can sometimes change the direction people are thinking and bias their answers. How do you fix that? Well, you might have to do two surveys and make your survey twice as big. It's a tough question to answer, but it's something that you should be aware of as part of this class. Now, emotional bias is when you ask a question like this: saying that there are 1.3 million homeless children dying of starvation on our streets. I'm sorry, I just get emotional. Seriously, homeless children is not a funny matter. But the question is, do you think the federal bank should lower interest rates? Is that really related to the homeless children? Are they homeless because of this? I mean, you're trying to connect emotion, how people feel about children, which is a strong reaction, to your real question, which is about federal interest rates. Yeah, that's called emotional bias. There are some things that will always get emotional bias. You try asking about religion, try asking about abortion. There are certain topics that are highly emotional by nature, and you may not be able to escape this. But something like this, they're just so blatant. I think we're edging into deliberate bias for the survey list. You can see how it overlaps. There's a small distinction. Deliberate bias, the hope is if you surveyed the right people, they wouldn't see that bias. Here, I think everyone is going to get emotional. This is going to affect everyone you survey. Confidentiality can be a big issue. Have you ever cheated on your partner? You're asking me in the middle of Prexy's pasture and you see the person next to me, yet you're not going to get honest answers out of this. Have you ever done illegal drugs? You're going to find out everyone you survey says, no, never. So questions like these, if you really want unbiased results, you've got to guard confidentiality. There's a big push in statistics to use the computer to do surveys. It turns out people actually trust computers less than people because they're afraid the computer is recording their IP address or there's some special webcam recording them, like now, which is a little creepy. But if you can find a way to guarantee people your answers are confidential, you might be able to find percentages for questions that are really touchy or sensitive or about illegal activity. One more definition, and then I want to give you a big example. Open questions have the problem of everyone you survey is going to give you a completely different answer. If you survey 1,000 people, you'll get 1,000 different answers. What that word issue means is different for everyone. Now, questions like these do happen in surveys because they're trying to narrow in what the next survey should be about. So they get 1,000 different answers, but they say there's 4 or 5 main topics that show up regularly, and then they'll do a new survey that says, which of these 4 topics do you believe is a bigger issue for candidates for US presidency? Something along those lines. So you get a lot of bias with the open question because people misunderstand differently. Now, these terms are supposed to be different from survey bias because survey bias, if you find the right people, you get good results from them. Question bias, everyone is going to find it too complex. Everyone is going to find it emotional. But there's really a lot of overlap because everyone doesn't always mean everyone. So these two videos really should go hand in hand. And on the exam, we try to make sure that if there's more than one answer, we only give you one of those answers. Now, a really important example of these all types of biases is the teacher evaluation, which is a big deal to all of us because administration looks at those to determine whether we're doing our job well. Look at the sampling bias. It's not open to all students, only students who took my class. But of those students, the ones who like the class usually are the least likely to take the teacher evaluation. The ones who really hated it and are really angry are more likely to fill out the teacher evaluation. Isn't that nice? Some of the questions on there you might consider a little vague. Rate the overall performance of the teacher. Well, what does that really mean? Is there desire to please? Sometimes students will really have good suggestions. I think we can improve the class, but they're afraid to criticize the teacher, and so they don't put that on there. Please know I care a lot about those teacher evaluations. I look through them and read them carefully, looking for suggestions and ideas on how to improve. We get some uninformed bias from the students who never actually took the class. Yeah, they still take the teacher evaluations. And often there's an emotional response. Emotional response to the stress you've had over the semester or the difficulty you've had in learning statistics, and that can translate into how the teacher themselves is evaluated. That's life, we get that, we know that's part of it. Question order is a big thought on those teacher evaluations. Notice the order is specific to tell us about the teacher, now tell us how you did in the class, because if we asked you how you did in the class first, that could bias how you answer the teacher evaluations. There are open questions, but only after we've asked questions that we, meaning the administration, can use to evaluate the value of a teacher because every student says something different on those open questions. And confidentiality. If you're worried about that, you'll get biased results from your teacher evaluations. I actually took a paper teacher evaluation while the teacher stood over us all like this. I was so mad. Ruined confidentiality. I actually wrote some really terrible things on there because I knew he was standing there watching me write it, and I feel a little bad about that. But gee, if you want unbiased results, give me some confidentiality, okay? That's why they're on the computer. It is very important for this class you do the teacher evaluations. Please take that seriously.